وبركاته. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما كثيرا ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. الحمد لله نحمد الله سبحانه وتعالى ونستعينه ونستغفره. MashaAllah, it's such a blessing for all these people to come together for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to see also the growth in this conference. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to increase it and bless all of the people. There's over 400 young volunteers. It's mashallah. And Toronto, thank you for hosting us, all of us. Somebody, one of the Lebanese immigrants to Canada asked me, كيف وجدت Canada? I said, Canada. The Arabs got that. You know, nada is dew, like dew in the morning, and Canada is like the dew. It revives your spirit. Whenever we come from your neighboring country, I'm not talking about the North Pole. Whenever we come from your neighboring country, we always just breathe a little freer. We thought we were having some barakah descend upon us, but the more things change, the more they stay the same. Alhamdulillah. But we're not going to give up on Barack Hussein Obama. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide all of these leaders, because if they're not guided, it's a disaster for us. And Abu Bakr al-Tartushi, one of the great Maliki scholars and great scholars of Islam, wrote a beautiful book called Siraj al-Muluk, the lamp of the kings or the rulers. And he said in there, anyone that makes dua, a prayer or an invocation against the leaders is a fool. Because in reality, he's making a prayer against himself. Because if they're guided, then the land benefits, and if they're misguided, then everybody is harmed. So we ask Allah to guide these people. We're in a global system now. There's no more clear demarcations. And we hope for the guidance of these people that are put in these positions that are certainly not enviable. Tonight's topic, inshallah, for me, is about Jesus, alayhi salam, Isa, in the three-phase. We have an interesting phenomenon with the Abrahamic religions. We have Judaism, and then we have Christianity, and we have Islam, and each one of them is under the umbrella of Ibrahim or Abraham or Ibrahim. The Quran actually has in the two qira'at, both are considered mutawatira. They call him Ibrahim and Ibrahim. So Ibrahim is also a qira'ah in the Quranic tradition. Ibrahim alayhi salam is the one that unites these three great traditions. The tradition of Musa alayhi salam, the tradition of Isa, Yeshua alayhi salam, and the tradition of our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. They're all our prophets, but he is the one that we nantami ilayhi, that we are associated with as people that follow the way of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And each prophet was given a mansak, a way, a shara, and a minhaj. The Jews call it a minhag. So they have the same idea, the method or the way that you follow. If we look at Christianity, when we talk about these religions, one of the major mistakes that we make is we speak about them as these monolithic entities. So we talk about Christianity, and yet what Christianity are we talking about? Because there are many Christianities. When we talk about Judaism, there are many different Judaisms. There's the ultra-Orthodox Judaism. There's a very fanatical, extreme Judaism of people like Mer Kahana, who, one of his students, Baruch Goldstein, went into the beautiful masjid in Khalil and killed 24 people and wounded 150 people. In 1994 this happened, and he was a devout Jewish man. He graduated from an Orthodox yeshiva in New York City. He was born in America. He went to medical school in the United States and then immigrated to Israel and thought he was getting closer to his God or his understanding of God by killing Muslims in their place of worship. And he did it as an act of worship, and his grave today is visited by zealots from the same type of Judaism that he adhered to, as if he was some type of saint. Now that certainly does not represent the Jews, but it represents a small group of the Jews. The same is true with Christianity. We have Christians historically, and I want to draw your attention to a study that was done by a historian called Body Count. This was a study in which he looked at the numbers throughout history of the great civilizations and these religious traditions to see which one had the most violence. And what he found, he divided them into anti-theist, like communism, fascism, Nazism, Buddhism, Christianity, the Indic, Hinduism, Islamic, the primal indigenous religions, Christianity. But what he found when he looked at all of these numbers, what he found was the single most violent religion in the history of human beings. In other words, the most dead as a result of that was in fact the Christian religion. A religion that teaches love and peace. It's quite extraordinary that this number of people from the Christianity, and we're talking about tens of millions of people. So the second one was actually the anti-theist, and that's only because of technology. The third one was Buddhism. People forget how violent Buddhism was historically. Buddhism has the best modern public relations of any world religion. If we had the Dalai Lama working for us, people would love us. It's amazing. Because they have... people think of Buddhism, they think of vegetarians. And the thing about vegetarians, they're nice people automatically. The reason you never get a vegetarian meal on airplanes is because they just don't care. Because vegetarians also say, oh, that's okay, don't worry about it. But if you order like a kosher meal or you order another type of meal, people get upset and they'll actually complain. Vegetarians, it's okay, peace. So Buddhists are associated with vegetarianism, and if you can't even hurt an animal, how are you going to hurt a human being? That's the idea. But Christianity historically has been a very violent religion, which is very unusual, given that it's a religion that is founded based on the idea of love. Love your neighbor as yourself. Turn the other cheek. These are Christian ideals that are taught. And for the first 300 years, the Christians actually followed those because they didn't have any power. But when Constantine adopted Christianity as a major religion, it became a religion of the state. And what's interesting is increasingly it became less and less tolerant until it was literally burning people at the stake. The Christians were burning people at the stake if they disagreed. And I'm talking about the church, the official organ, not the Christians. The Christians were just people, like Muslims. You have Muslims that are living, and then you have, unfortunately, some Muslims that think that they're doing a good deed, getting close to God by harming other people. There's people that do that. So there were periods when the church actually did this. But if you look at the early period of Christianity, and I'm talking about the first 300 years, in Surah Al-Kahf, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the period of the people of the cave. And it says 300 years, and some say 309. That period was not the amount of time they were actually in the cave. It's actually the amount of time that they were persecuted. For 300 years, the Christians were persecuted. The sleepers of the cave, which are the 7 sleepers of Ephesus, enter into the cave about 250. And they spent some period of time in there when they came out. But the sleepers of the cave are actually canonized saints in the Orthodox tradition, and they're rejected in the Catholic tradition. And one of the things that Islam does is the Qur'an is actually a clarification for the previous dispensation. So it's telling the previous people that indeed there really were these 7 martyrs. And they really did go into this cave and they were assigned from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is one of the things that the Qur'an teaches about the differences of the Christians. Now, if you look in Christianity, there are many different groups. One of the earliest groups were called the Ebionites. The Ebionites, which is an Aramaic word which means poor people. The Ebionites were Christian Jews. They were people that believed that you had to follow the Sabbath. You didn't eat pork. You kept Qurrat law. You ate kosher food. That you took the Sabbath. They had ritual washing like ghusl and wudu, very similar. A nice old English word for wudu is lustrations, which in the dictionary says archaic for ritual washing before prayer. And the root word is from a Latin word which means to shine brightly, which is exactly what wudu means. It means to make you shine. So this is again something that Islam retained from previous dispensations. The Jews also washed. They had ritual washing. So the Ebionites were one of the churches of, in fact, probably from Jerusalem. And I just want to read you something very interesting that Paul says. And I'm reading from the Gospel, the New Testament rather. It's from 2 Corinthians in the 11th chapter. And this is, I just got this from the Fairmont Hotel, because it's from Gideon. So, it's a hotel Bible. In Corinthians 11, Paul says, he's talking to the Corinthians, he says, I wish that you would bear with me in a little foolishness, but indeed you are bearing with me. For I am jealous for you with a godly jealousy. For I betrothed you to one husband, so that to Christ I might present you as a pure virgin. In other words, in your understanding. But I am afraid that as the serpent deceived Eve by his craftiness, your minds will be led astray from the simplicity and purity of devotion to Christ. In other words, worshiping Christ. People are going to take you away from worshiping Christ. But I am afraid, for if one comes and preaches another Jesus, if one comes and preaches another Jesus, whom we have not preached, or you receive a different spirit which you have not received, or a different gospel which you have not accepted, you bear this, what I'm teaching you, beautifully. In other words, you don't listen to those other people that are teaching about another Jesus. They're teaching another gospel. What is that gospel and who's that other Jesus? The Ebionites did not believe Jesus was God. They thought he was a prophet of God. This was the original Jewish Christianity that we believe Jesus taught and that Paul is warning these people about. Don't listen to these people who are going to teach you, take you away from the devotion, in other words, the worship of Jesus, and tell you that he was just a man like other men, that he was a prophet like other prophets, and that he's not divine or the son of the divine. That was one version. The Ebionites. And then you had a whole slew of different gospels. You had Gnostic gospels. In 1945, a young shepherd named Muhammad Ali was out digging around in Egypt looking for fertilizer, and he came across a big clay jar, and he actually was worried there might be a jinn inside of it. But he decided to break it open, thinking there might also be gold. So he broke it open, and what did he find? A bunch of paper with ancient writing on it. So he thought maybe we could use it for something. He took it home. His mother used some of it to start the fire for dinner that evening. I'm not making this up. But Muhammad Ali thought maybe this might be worth something, so he took it to sell it. It ended up being the Nag Hammadi Library, one of the earliest collections of writings, including a full copy of the Gospel of Thomas. We forget that there were many Gospels. There were Gnostic Gospels. In the Gospel of Thomas, it mentions, for instance, that Jesus appears to his followers and says that you think I'm being crucified. I'm not being crucified. That's somebody else. That's actually in the Gnostic Gospel. There's another Gospel, the Docetists, who were a group of Christians that believed that Christ did not get crucified, but rather it was only an image of Christ. There's also a group of people that believe that they call it the divine intelligence. They separate between what's called the lahut and the nasut in Arabic theology, the divinity of Jesus and the human Jesus. They're separated, so the human Jesus was crucified, the divine Jesus was not crucified. So these are all debates that were happening in early Christianity, and what's so interesting is when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about them that the Jews وَبِكُفْرِهِمْ وَقَوْلِهِمْ عَلَى مَرْيَمْ, and they said about Maryam بُهْتَانًا عَظِيمًا, they said a great calumny against Maryam. What did they say against Maryam? They said that she was a woman of loose morals, that she actually betrayed her husband. The theologians say Al-Haki bil-Kufr laysa bi-kafir. The one relating kufr is not a kafir. So just take note, anybody out there. But this is important because it affirms and asserts what our Quran told us centuries later. Because what's so amazing about this is that the statement against Mary is only found in one of the Talmudic scriptures. Because they consider the Talmud is the oral tradition, the Mishnah and the Gemara, which is similar to, in some ways it's like our fiqh, in other ways it's like hadith. It has a lot of the opinions of the rabbis, it has different discussions, they discuss many, many things in the Talmud. But in the Talmud of the Babylonian, it's called the Bavli Talmud, which is not in the Jerusalem Talmud. It says that Mary was a loose woman who uncovered her hair. She was a weaver, and she used to weave in the marketplace, which was an immodest thing to do. And that there was a centurion named Panthera, who is the father of Jesus. And this is exactly what the Quran says. It says that they said this great calumny against Miriam, which the Prophet ﷺ had no access to this. In fact, an account which verifies what the Talmud says, because certain Jewish scholars denied that it was talking about Jesus. But it's very clear, and I just want to mention an interesting book that I was amazed could be published by Princeton University Press and not make a big splash, which is called Jesus in the Talmud, by Paul Schaffer. He's one of the leading experts on Jewish studies at Princeton University. And he wrote a book called Jesus in the Talmud, refuting the argument that it's not Jesus, it's somebody else. He's saying that it's talking about Jesus. And it's a very convincing argument if you read it. But if you look, and I want to make something really clear at this point. When we talk about Jews, or Muslims, or Christians, we have to be very careful. Because one of the rhetorical devices in Arabic is what's called itlaq al-kull ala al-ba'd, which means in Arabic rhetoric, when you talk about one group of people by talking about the whole group, but you actually only mean a group. This is not all Jews, and this is very important to note. Not all Jews believe this, or even say this, or teach this. And there are rabbis that don't teach this, and there are rabbis that don't accept this. So it's very important for people to understand, because this created grave misunderstanding in the medieval period. Jews were persecuted when these things were translated into the vernaculars of Europe, because they thought that all Jews thought these things about Jesus. So I just want to make that very clear, but it's important in order to understand the Quranic narrative, because there are people that claim that the Quran is a mishmash. It's a hodgepodge. It doesn't get things right. It says that Maryam marries the sister of Aaron, and that's the sister of Moses. That's not the mother of Jesus. And yet, Ukht, Ya Ukht Harun, means, O sister of Aaron, O Levinite, that you are of the Levitical strain of Judaism. You are one of the clan of Aaron, which we know Maryam was. She is considered from the clan of Aaron. So that's not a mistake that the Prophet made. In fact, when the Christians of Najran asked the Prophet about that verse, he clarified to them exactly what it meant. So it wasn't as if the Prophet ﷺ didn't know, that he just made a mistake. This is one of the arguments that Orientalists use against Islam. But what's important about this is that the Quran says that they said this about Jesus, about Mary, that she was a loose woman, hashaha, ahsanat farjaha. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praises her and says she was a chaste and virtuous woman. She's a sign. She's ummuhu siddiqa. His mother was a siddiqa, which is the tzaddik. In Jewish tradition, the tzaddik is the highest person after a prophet. So it's even a word that the Jews understand and use